NewsHour in the U.S. is supported by USB technology, reminding consumers worldwide that USB-enabled products with the certified USB logos are designed for performance, power, reliability, and interoperability. Learn more at certifiedusb.com.
Let's talk to one of the vendors.
Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs
11
in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware
the other day when we got supposedly just an inch here.
11 inches.
Don't stress about where to get information you can trust. Let Morning Edition from NPR News be your guide. Listen weekdays.
Listen here on CPR News, on your smart speaker, and on the Colorado Public Radio app. When major news breaks in Colorado, you're the first to know because you signed up for the Lookout. Get the daily newsletter from CPR News and get breaking news alerts in your inbox. Sign up now at cpr.org/lookout. CPR serves Coloradans thanks to generous investments from the community, including from leadership partners. Thank you Doctors Andre Tribling and Don Klum for your support. There's information about philanthropic giving at cpr.org.
It does not fall down anywhere. It can. If I may belt.
BBC News with Moira Anderson. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has approved a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah in Lebanon. The truce, which will be formally approved by the Israeli cabinet, is expected to come into force at 10 a.m. local time on Wednesday. The UN Humanitarian Agency says none of the UN's attempts this month to bring life-saving assistance to Palestinians in besieged parts of northern Gaza have been facilitated by Israel. The United Arab Emirates has thanked Turkey for its help in the arrest of 3 Uzbek nationals wanted for the killing of the Dubai-based rabbi Zvi Kogan on Sunday. Reports citing Turkish security sources say the men were caught in Istanbul by Turkish police and then extradited to the UAE on Monday. Pakistan's government has ruled out talks with protesters demanding the release of the jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Police in Brazil have accused the former president Jair Bolsonaro of having direct control over a coup plot, which failed because the heads of the army and air force refused to back it. According to a police report, Mr. Bolsonaro had full knowledge of a plan to assassinate his rival, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Greenland's government has said it will pay compensation to 15 indigenous women who were victims of a forced contraception campaign. They'll receive $42,000 each. Google says it's assisting the authorities in northern India with an investigation into the deaths of 3 brothers who drove off an incomplete bridge while following a route on its Google Maps app. US lawmakers say 5 major American airlines made more than $12 billion
probably all in the same car.
6 years.
Drove off the end of a bridge that wasn't completed
as junk fees.
because Google Maps told them to go that way.
Says passengers were charged to select seats or carry-on bags, making air travel more expensive.
There's a bridge.
That's the latest world news from the BBC.
Laughing matter, but
Welcome back to NewsHour. We're going to hear from Afghanistan now, and that in itself has a certain power. Because you remember the Taliban edict that women's voices should not be heard aloud in public.
Well, I would think they'd ignore the signs that said closed.
Jobs for women.
Wouldn't there be something?
It turns out there's more than one way to be heard. Monica Whitlock has been recording the diary of one young Afghan woman determined to make her voice count.
yeah, it makes no sense.
The voice of Sheikh Mohammed Khalid Hanifi,
First I thought maybe it was a
Minister
way
for
to
the
snow, but
Promotion of
that top bar
Virtue
was
and the
pretty
Prevention of
good.
Vice in Afghanistan. He's setting out details of Taliban restrictions on the sound of women's voices. It's written that women must not raise their voices aloud in prayer, he says, let alone sing songs. The law on moral decency, first issued in August, stipulates that a woman can only leave her house alone in case of urgent need. And then she must cover her body, her face, and her voice.
Sharia law
So what's it like to live under these
when it comes
laws?
to ladies.
Hello to everyone who'll hear me without seeing me, a young Afghan girl, amid the sadness that geography has imposed.
Pleasure of their men.
I've been talking to one young woman in Afghanistan. We'll call her Layla, although it's not her real name. Layla was a university student when the Taliban returned to power in 2021. is not her voice.
Bet you get some big
hear,
old
but they
knobbies
are
for
her
those
words.
e-bikes.
Life continues,
Ride around in the winter.
whether you're a lion in the forest, free, or a dove in a cage. I have a lot to say.
Layla and her sisters are the first women in their family to read and write. They had ambitious plans for their adult lives, but then the university closed for girls. She's still determined to qualify, though, and studies at home through an online remote school. Women aren't allowed to go to gyms or do sport.
So I put on a black veil, covering my face. I toss my sport clothes into my bag and leave the house. No one must know where I'm going. The Taliban roam the city armed. We meet in an abandoned house each day. We have dance on Mondays, and yoga on Thursdays, and
You ever need me to
Zumba
hold your
during
cash for you? Let me
Sundays.
know, okay, baby.
Huh?
If you ever need me to hold your
I
cash in my
find
wallet,
joy
let
in
me know.
exercise as a forbidden activity. Our whole life is a secret.
A few days later, Layla told me that the Taliban had discovered that abandoned house. They arrested the owner, and the girls never returned. Layla does everything she can to keep going. She loves art and music, and the sound of women singing together.
Although Taliban banned any sound for women or music, we still do it in our house. We have a tradition of singing together until the sun rises. The Taliban came to our house and warned us that they could
I
not
didn't know
stop
what I was going
us.
to cook you for dinner tonight.
But Layla,
kind
you
of
might hear
glad
much
about that
more
now.
of what she had to say on assignment. Our whole life is a secret. It's the edition of assignment. You can listen to it here on the BBC World Service and the documentary podcast. The BBC World Service, and this is News Hour, live from London with me, Tim Franks, and let's return to our main
traction
story.
control is a fucking
The
joke.
announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin
Traction
Netanyahu
control.
said that the Israeli
traction
military had
control.
set
Traction.
Hezbollah decades
It automatically
and
kicks in when the
together
tire starts
tens
to
of
slip.
thousands of Israelis have been forced to leave their homes in the
can
north
turn
of
it
the
off.
country because of missile fire from
I guess I
Hezbollah to
can.
be able to return to their homes. So what does one resident of a northern town that can barely be close to the Lebanese border make of that promise? Dr. Paula
I guess
Potashny
I'll
is a
be making 2
biochemist
trips again.
from Metula. She was
4 or 5
forced to
with the
leave.
heaters.
She now lives in the center of Israel. Does she take
It's in bag.
reassurance
It's in
from the
the
news of the ceasefire?
I will not
Bags are
go
probably
back
heavier
to
than
Abdullah because it's not safety and not secure. Because I think the ceasefire it's not a good solution. I'm against the war, but they started the war because the connection with Gaza. If the ceasefire will not include ceasefire with Gaza and the release of the hostages, of the 101 hostages, this is not a good agreement. I think it will be a disaster.
So in other words, just to be clear, Paula, you are saying you will not feel safe to go back to your home in Metula until there is a ceasefire in Gaza as well?
Yes, it is connected.
It's interesting to hear what you're saying, because I was reading that the mayor of Metula, of your town, David Azulai, has been saying that he's disappointed with this ceasefire agreement, but the reason he's disappointed, you're saying we need to have a more comprehensive peace agreed. He is saying, he's calling this a surrender agreement, and that this will allow Hezbollah to rehabilitate, to rebuild, and to be a threat once again. But you're taking you're saying that you're not satisfied with this for a very different
No,
reason.
I'm not agree with David Azulay. I'm not agree with him. I don't think wars will give a solution for this conflict. This is not a solution. The military, the army will not bring the solution. I think we have to talk and to recognize all the rights of every people, from Palestinians to Lebanese and Israel. This ceasefire is to continue the war after 60 days.
It must come at a cost to you, though, this. I mean, you say you don't feel that it would be safe to return to Metula, but that just means that you carry on not being able to go home? You presumably, it must feel like you're living your life out of a suitcase.
Yes, I have changed all my life the last year, but I can say you that for me, it's more important to be in peace with people and to avoid violent decisions and war. I can not go back to my home. In my opinion, a piece of land, it costs less than human life.
It sounds, Paula, as if you are thinking you're not sure whether you will ever go back to your home. Do you think you will ever
maybe
go back?
I will never return back. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe in the future, but I don't think now I will go there because all the situation is so complicated. I didn't realize that it can happen in the border with Lebanon the same as it was last year in the border with Gaza. So I don't think I want to die and to be kidnapped, to be a hostage. I don't believe in this agreement because the hate is still here. The hate is still very big. And I know they want to kill us. And we also want to kill them. It's in the both sides. And I am against this.
Biochemist, displaced from Metula in northern Israel. As we've been hearing through the program, one of the big questions in this putative ceasefire agreement is how it will be implemented, how it will be monitored, and what the role of outside powers would be. There's talk about the US leading some sort of international monitoring mechanism. Joining us now is Frank Lowenstein. He was US Special Envoy to the Middle East under President Obama. Frank, very good to have you back on NewsHour. How confident are you that this ceasefire deal can stick beyond its 60 days?
Well, listen, I think it's a very positive development for President Biden. They've worked very hard to achieve this ceasefire. And I think Biden can now leave office saying that he prevented a regional war from spinning out of control, which has been one of his major objectives. That being said, there's a lot left to be determined before we can say this is a sustainable ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. First of all, they haven't finalized the deal yet. It doesn't go into effect until tomorrow. And we negotiated, Secretary and I did, in 2014, a ceasefire with Hamas that was agreed to and then fell apart before it was implemented. And then, of course, it's a 60-day interim period after that, and before we know whether this is really going to take or not. And then Israel retains the right to go in and fight Hezbollah again if they think Hezbollah is rearming. And as you mentioned, I think the implementation mechanism is very unclear at this point. So very positive development, but we're a long way from a sustainable peace.
Well, you just said Israel retains the right to go in. I mean, is it clear from your reading? I mean, clearly this is not an agreement that has yet been published. Maybe, I don't know, it won't be. But is your sense that Israel will need to get permission from, for example, the United States before it launches, possible action over the border? Or, will it have freedom to move and maybe move preemptively?
Well, they have an understanding with the United States. There's a side agreement, a letter agreement between the U.S. and Israel, which specifically states that Israel retains the right to attack inside of Lebanon on the ground or through the air if they determine that Hezbollah is trying to rearm. Now, I think the Trump administration will give them carte blanche to do that. So whether there's technically a sign-off from the U.S. or not is really irrelevant, because they know they'll get that from us if they want to.
Right. So the very fact that Donald Trump is coming in and within 2 months, you think has in a sense given Benjamin Netanyahu the cover. In that case, is the fact that we're told that there's some sort of international monitoring group involving the US, but other powers as well, and that also somehow a beefed up Lebanese army along with a newly reinvigorated UN monitoring mission is all going to be in place. I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds as if that could be slightly performative.
Yeah, I don't think any of that stuff has been determined in a way that's fundamentally different from the way 1701 was implemented in the past. So yes, there's an international monitoring force. Apparently it's going to be occupying the border between Israel and Lebanon, and then also the Litani River, to assure that Hezbollah doesn't go over that line. But that being said, that process, that mechanism has not worked in the past. So what is exactly the role of the United States going to be in enforcing this agreement over time? Are we going to put U.S. soldiers at risk? I really doubt that.
Well, and indeed, while we've been speaking, President Biden has just said there will be no U.S. troops in southern Lebanon, so he's made that very clear.
Yeah, exactly. So you're left with the Lebanese armed forces, which, as you just mentioned, is an extremely weak military right now. They have no ability to fight Hezbollah at all. So if Hezbollah decides they want to violate that agreement, or Israel decides that Hezbollah has violated that agreement, the LAF is not going to be the ones to push back on Hezbollah.
Frank, just briefly, Antony Blinken was saying earlier today he hoped this would be the springboard for a ceasefire in Gaza. What are your thoughts?
Well, certainly it's a positive step in that direction, in the sense that Iran has now agreed to decouple the conflict in Lebanon from the conflict in Gaza, and it does, in theory, at least isolate Hamas a bit more than they were in the past. But that being said, there's absolutely no indication from either the Israelis or Hamas that they're interested in pursuing any kind of a ceasefire in Gaza. So I think that's we're a long way from home on that one.
Frank Lowenstein, very good to have you back on the program. Thank you very much for joining us. Former US Special Envoy to the Middle East under President Obama. Depraved is the word the UK government has used to describe the increasingly vocal nuclear threats coming from the Kremlin, following the decision by the US and the UK to allow Ukraine to fire long-range missiles into Russian territory. President Putin announced he was lowering the threshold for the potential use of Russia's nuclear weapons. Now, for the first time, a Russian military officer who served inside one of Russia's top-secret nuclear bases has spoken out. The man fled the country after being threatened with deployment to the front line in Ukraine. The BBC's Will Vernon went to meet him at a secret location outside Russia.
Агрессию против России со стороны... Если еще не дошло, то... Ядерная война.
On Russian TV, the West is regularly threatened with atomic annihilation.
Вообще на британских островах, похоже, заговаривают.
MPs and pundits discuss firing nuclear weapons at London and other Western cities. Some in the West are even posing the most disturbing question of all. How close is President Putin to pressing the nuclear button? I'm meeting a man who worked on the inside. We're calling him Anton. He's a former officer in the elite nuclear forces and was stationed at a top-secret base in Russia. He's voiced here by an actor.
The troops are there to either repel or carry out a nuclear strike. There's a very strict selection process. There are constant checks and lie detector tests. It's a closed society. There are no strangers there. If you want your parents to visit, you need to submit a request to the FSB security service 3 months in advance.
Anton's testimony offers an insight into the inner workings of a nuclear weapons facility. It is extremely rare for service members to talk to journalists.
On the day the war started, we were put on full combat readiness and shut in the base. The weapons were fully in place and we were ready to the maximum extent. The state of alert was cancelled after 2 or 3 weeks.
Anton's job at the nuclear base was so-called political education of the troops. Not long after the full-scale invasion started, he says he was given what he describes as a criminal order to hold lectures with his troops using very specific written guidelines.
They said that Ukrainian civilians were combatants and should be destroyed. That's a red line for me. It's a war crime. I said I wouldn't spread this propaganda.
Senior officers reprimanded Anton by transferring him to a regular assault brigade in another part of the country. Assault brigades are regularly deployed on the front line in Ukraine, sent into battle as the first wave, sometimes suffering heavy casualties. When Anton arrived at the assault brigade, he was told he would be sent to war and managed to leave the country. He believes the top-level security clearance system failed.
I think this lucky thing is connected to my transfer to the ordinary frontline unit. If I had run away from the nuclear forces base, then the local FSB security service would have reacted decisively and I probably wouldn't have been able to leave the country.
Anton showed us documents confirming his rank and other parts of his story, although we couldn't independently verify everything he told us.
And that was Will Vernon with that report. You're listening to NewsHour, live from the BBC.
Distribution of the BBC NewsHour in the U.S. is supported by Financial Times, the pink newspaper whose journalism is designed to encourage fearless thinking on American political and business news. There's more at ft.com. And BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 35,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public.
On the next Fresh Air, John David and Malcolm Washington join me to discuss bringing the August Wilson play The Piano Lesson to film on Netflix. It was a family affair with their sister and father, Denzel Washington, as producers. The two talk candidly about navigating Hollywood and forging a name for themselves outside of their famous father. Join us.
Coming your way next hour on CPR News and KRCC.
If you want to name a mountain in Colorado, where do you start?
What is the state's most iconic food?
Why does Pena Boulevard have a bike lane?
And does anyone use it?
These are the kinds of Colorado questions we've gotten and answered in the past. I'm Corey Jones from the CPR Newsroom, and we want to hear from you too. Ask your question at cpr.org/Colorado Wonders and help us all discover more about our state of wonders.
Support comes from Colorado College, offering the block plan in which students can focus completely on one class at a time with global education and field study. Learn more at coloradocollege.edu/global and field study.
Live from the BBC, Romania has become the latest European country to see a surge in support for right-wing nationalism. Calin Georgescu came top in the first round of the presidential election on Sunday. It was a shock, at least as far as the opinion polls were concerned. He'll now face the centre-right candidate Elena Lasconi in a runoff next month. Mr. Georgescu is a critic of both NATO and the European Union. He's seen as having views sympathetic to Russia. These students in Bucharest are not impressed. No fascism, no war, no Georgescu in the second round, they're chanting. Well, he is in the second round. My colleague Celia Hatton has been speaking to Calin Georgescu. How did he do it?
Just with the Romanian people. So Romanian people, after 35 years, already they realized that they have to be themselves. And there's nobody in order to dictate in their place. And Romanian people recognize his consciousness that this is possible. And this was the first line victory.
How big a factor was social media? Some are calling you the TikTok candidate.
Well, social media probably was the only part of the freedom instead of the broadcast. And indeed, social media was used by the people to communicate and to generate the communication essence that the Romanian people is on the first place. However, I want also to underline that the budget of this campaign was zero. And this was demonstrated by documents, by facts. I had a very small team, just probably maximum 10 people, no more. But we had millions of people behind.
Some have suggested there was outside help, maybe coming from Russia, from the Kremlin, to help amplify your campaign?
Yeah, the only help was from God. This is all.
But you can understand why some are skeptical. You seemingly came from nowhere.
From nowhere? I'm coming from Romanian people. They are surprised because they didn't realize that Romanian people can succeed. And in 35 years, we have just political parties. Yeah, I can understand. But the times change. And we discuss about big shift. They cannot understand that would be possible, a big shift in this society.
Can you tell me more about this big shift? What do you mean by big shift?
Big shift means that the Romanian people doesn't trust anymore in the Romanian political parties. I cannot say more, as Romanian people said already. I'm just their representative. But the heavy work was from Romanian people, not from me.
But those political parties would also claim to represent the interests of the Romanian people. Why are you different?
I'm not different. Romanian people is different. Romanian people, they need freedom. Real democracy means spirituality, God, our land, our property, our soul, our family. These make the difference. For them, of course, it's impossible to understand because here we discuss about relation with God. God give to us our country, not from Brussels or from Washington. We receive from God and remain like this forever.
Mr. Ceausescu, can you tell us some of your concrete policy plans if you make it into office?
I'm looking for a country of sovereignty, which does mean we have to remain on our independence. We have to finance ourselves and to administrate ourselves, our natural resources. Nobody have to touch our land and our natural resources. We are just on the first place. Romanian people, they are the owners of the country, and we have to remain like this. This is the main point of the game.
And do you feel right now that Romania's land, Romania's property is under threat? Is the country's sovereignty under threat?
We discuss about the interest of the biggest corporations. They dictate the market, they dictate the price, they dictate everything. And the Romanian product doesn't exist anymore. Romania make import. 90% of that food is coming from outside. This is absolutely incredible one. So Romania can give food to entire Europe. England is a trading country. Romania is a commodity country. This made the difference between us and Europe because we have all the necessary value and resource in order to be rich ourselves first, and we can export to everybody if necessary.
And what is your stance for Romania's provision of aid to Ukraine?
Peace is a strategy. The war in Ukraine has to be stopped, definitely. Nobody has any interest on that because here we discuss about life, we discuss economy, which is totally destroyed, and I am just for peace. So the war in Ukraine have to be stopped. And I am a person who will be engaged in this process in order to don't continue anymore this situation, which nobody has any value from that.
What about NATO? You once called the NATO base in Romania an affront to diplomacy.
Look, we are totally comfortable, and I repeat again that it's fine and it's good that Romania is a member of NATO and the European Union, but we have to see our interests here, which does mean the national interest is on first place. We have to negotiate hard because we are member of this, let's say, clubs.
Negotiate with who?
Negotiate does mean that we cannot accept what other people said for us. National interest is on the first place. If something will be clarified regarding their, let's say, their decision, our decision is first.
Do you mean you want to renegotiate the terms of your NATO membership?
No, I don't say it about this. Any project by NATO or by European to Romania have to be negotiated based on the national interest of Romanian people. We need peace, we need development, we need security of the people, we need to protect the families, we need to protect our children. If NATO will accommodate with us, I'm sure that we have the line to communicate and to make the dialogue.
Are you happy for NATO to continue to have a base in your country?
Look, in the moment when everything is on the national interest, I have no problem. But this have to be based on loyalty and cooperation. We have to be informed before any decision in our name. And after that, we'll see if our national interests reflect what they want to do.
Just looking forward to the second round, can you take the momentum of your victory forward into the second round, or what would you say to those who say this was simply a protest vote?
It's not the first time when they made a mistake, the system, the media, and the political parties. And exactly like that was United States with the President Donald Trump, and was exactly vice versa. So exactly this will happen in Romania. It was an ignorance of the life of the people, 35 years. And Romania is very low in economy, a country with huge natural resources, with huge potential, with enormous number of people outside of the country, which is absolutely incredible. In England, there are more than 1 million Romanian people. All the polls were fake. And this was a huge demonstration that Romanian people, they have power when they want to be free and to have freedom and to have democracy.
Man came first in Sunday's presidential election in Romania, at least the first round of that presidential election, Călin Georgescu. And we were speaking to my colleague Celia Hatton. That's it from this edition of NewsHour on the evening. local time, that a ceasefire deal between Hezbollah and Israel was agreed. From all of us, thanks for listening.
This is CPR News, 89.5 FM KPRN Grand Junction, 88.3 FM KPRH Montrose, 88.3 FM KPYR Craig, and at CPR.org.
Support comes from the Colorado Symphony performing Mozart and Now, January 10th through 12th at Becher Concert Hall. 3 performances contrasting the music of Mozart and today's composers. coloradosymphony.org.
From WHYY in Philadelphia, this is Fresh Air. I'm Tanya Mosley. Today, John David and Malcolm Washington. The brothers have collaborated on a new film, adapting August Wilson's play The Piano Lesson for Netflix. The production of this film was a family affair. Malcolm served as the director, and his sister and father, award-winning actor Denzel Washington, are producers. The film is about a family conflict over whether to keep a piano as an heirloom or sell it and buy the land family members were enslaved on. John David stars as Boy Willie, who tries to make the case to sell the piano. Malcolm tells the story of how John David would bark like a dog before he called action.
He just starts barking like crazy right before we start shooting, like, right? Camera roll? Yeah.
What's that about, John David? What is it about?
That's a good question.
This and more stories from the set of The Piano Lesson. First News.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden confirms the governments of Israel and Lebanon have agreed to a ceasefire deal. He says the U.S. brokered a truce is designed to end the deadliest conflict between Israeli forces and Iran-backed Hezbollah militants in decades.
Expected at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities.
Biden says the deal bars the Hezbollah infrastructure from being rebuilt. President-elect Trump's incoming border czar, Tom Homan, paid a visit to the southern U.S. border today. Along with Texas Governor Greg Abbott in Eagle Pass, Homan pledged the incoming administration would follow through on its plans to tighten immigration.
Let me be clear. There is going to be a mass deportation because we just finished a mass illegal immigration crisis on the border.
Trump cites illegal migration as well as the illegal trafficking of drugs such as fentanyl to the U.S. for his push to impose steep tariffs on China as well as trade partners in North America. In Canada, Ontario's premier says Trump's threat to level a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods feels like a family member stabbing you right in the heart. Trump says a 25% tariffs will also extend to Mexico, and China will be hit with an additional 10%. Here's NPR's Jackie Northam.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford says the 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods is, quote, the biggest threat we've ever seen. Ford said it will hurt Canadians as well as American workers and employers. Trump says the steep tariffs are to halt drugs and immigrants flooding across U.S. borders, but it could have a boomerang effect. Canada and the U.S. are each other's largest trade partners, with nearly $3 billion worth of goods and services crossing the border each day. If Canada retaliates, it could drive up the costs of vehicles, construction materials, and gas in the U.S. Canada supplies more than half of U.S. crude imports. Jackie Northam, NPR News.
Trump's nominee to lead the Pentagon has called to limit women's roles in the military. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports groups that support female troops are objecting.
Pete Hegseth says women should not serve in combat roles and that increasing diversity has lowered standards. Senior Pentagon officials have shot back that women have served successfully in combat since before it was allowed in 2015. And with military recruiting under pressure, retired Colonel Ellen Herring says the force can't afford to lose battle-tested troops.
One of the big initial effects would be that the combat arms would lose over 3,000 soldiers. How are they going to fill that hole? It creates like a huge vacuum in the combat branches.
The leading organization combating sexual assault in the military, Protect Our Defenders, has also called on Congress not to confirm Hegseth, who was accused of a sexual assault in 2017, an encounter Hegseth says was consensual. Will Lawrence, NPR News.
It's NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
This is CPR News at KRCC. I'm Nathan Fernando Frescas. State officials have eliminated a rule allowing religious preschools in Colorado's Universal Preschool Program to give enrollment preference to members of their congregations. CPR education reporter Jenny Brandine reports.
The latest change to UPK rules comes after a judge said religious schools might be able to give preference, but must still follow the state's anti-discrimination laws. Officials said they need to change the rule because of a recent lawsuit brought by 2 Catholic parishes. They claimed the churches couldn't participate in UPK because they didn't want to allow children from LGBTQ families. The state said the rule allowing preference for members was never meant to let preschools avoid Colorado's non-discrimination laws, but the judge ruled that it effectively does. Colorado nixed the religious preference rule last week. Meantime, the parishes have appealed the judge's ruling. Jenny Brandine, CPR News.
Meanwhile, 3 West Slope elementary schools will now close at the end of the school year. Mesa County school leaders added 2 more buildings to the list last week after extensive pushback from the community. Shannon Bigo, the demographer for School District 51, says declining enrollment has districts across the state making similar decisions.
And this birth rate thing is not just hurting us, it's hurting every district in the state of Colorado right now.
The vote was initially postponed amid questions about new housing stock in the area. A 12-year-old in El Paso County is facing charges after allegedly bringing a handgun to school. The sheriff's office responded to a school in the Miami Yoder district last week after an unloaded gun was found in the student's backpack. According to authorities, the juvenile found the weapon in their house before taking it to school. Snow continues in the mountains through Thursday morning. There's a chance for a quick burst of snow in the Denver metro tomorrow morning. This is CPR News and KRCC.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Tanya Mosley, and today my guests are Malcolm and John David Washington. The brothers collaborated on the late August Wilson's The Piano Lesson for the screen on Netflix. It's the 4th play in Wilson's American Century Cycle, a series of 10 plays that captures the Black American experience through every decade of the 20th century. Malcolm serves as the director, and John David stars as the brash, impulsive, and fast-talking boy Willie, who wants to sell the family piano to buy land in Mississippi that his family was enslaved on. The family battle ensues between boy Willie and his sister Bernice, played by Danielle Deadweiler, who wants the family to hold on to the piano, a family heirloom engraved with their ancestors' faces. The production of this film was a family affair. The brothers, sister Katia, and their father, Oscar-winning Denzel Washington, are producers. And Denzel, who starred and co-produced in Wilson's Fences, has committed to adapting Wilson's plays into 10 films. Their mother, Pauletta Washington, even appears in the movie, starring as Mama Ola. The Piano Lesson is Malcolm Washington's directorial debut for a feature film, and John David portrayed Boy Willie in the Broadway revival of The Piano Lesson. He's also starred in several films, including Spike Lee's Black Klansman and Christopher Nolan's time travel mind-bender Tenet. John David and Malcolm Washington, welcome to Fresh Air.
Thank you for having us. Hello. Yeah, thank you. That was quite an introduction. I was like, whoa.
Well, I want to get right into our discussion about the film by playing a clip. And the story takes place in 1936. Bernice, played by Danielle Deadweiler, lives in Pittsburgh with the piano, and her brother, Boy Willie, played by you, John David, is a sharecropper in their hometown of Mississippi, and he's driven up to Pittsburgh in hopes of persuading Bernice to sell. And their uncle, played by Samuel L. Jackson, explains why Bernice won't do it. He speaks first. Let's listen.
Bernice ain't
gonna sell that piano. 'Cause her daddy died over it.
All that's in the past. If my daddy had seen where he could have traded that piano and for some land of his own, we'd be sitting up here now. He spent his whole life farming somebody else's land. I ain't gonna do that.
That was my guest today, John David Washington, with Samuel L. Jackson in the Netflix film The Piano Lesson, directed by my other guest, Malcolm Washington. And, you know, this is such a Black American story that endures, that yearning to pass down items of value up against this very real and often desperate need to sell for practical reasons, or in Boy Willie's case, to gamble towards this American dream of owning land. And I want to start by asking you, Malcolm, what was it about this story that you felt was not only enduring, but an urgent one that needed to be retold now?
Yeah, I think it's really, really, really important for people to learn their history, to both ancestral and just culturally, know where you come from, and acknowledge it, because we're living in a time where people are trying to rewrite history or erase people from history and their contributions. So it's kind of incumbent upon all of us to reclaim our stories, you know, and proclaim them and declare them, who we are as a people, who we are as a culture and identity. All these things are super urgent to reclaim.
You also wanted to bring a modern touch to this. And I mean, August Wilson is one of the greatest playwrights of our time. So, I mean, this material is just right. But I can imagine that's also intimidating, possibly. What was your first step in bringing your director's touch to what is well-established material?
Yeah, it was intimidating, but it was also very exciting. The first step was putting this into context, right? A historical context. Understanding the moment that the play was written in, the moment that it's speaking to, that it's set in. It was about learning as much as I could about August Wilson, his considerations as a writer, who he was as a man, where he's from, what he stood on, his belief system. Understand all these things about him and his intentions so that you can kind of pass it through the prism of yourself, and bring your voice to it, but always trying to serve this kind of bigger thing.
John David, in the scene that we played, you were in character with Samuel L. Jackson, who actually originally played Boy Willie in 1987. And in this film, he plays the uncle to Bernice and Boy Willie. His performance, it's quiet, it's contemplative. He exudes kind of like this wise knowing as he watches you. And for me, it was a little bit emotional. I'm like going through this moment where I'm looking at all of our actors as we move through time and they age. It was just emotional to watch, knowing his history with the character. What was it like for you to watch him watch you, both in the Broadway version and in this movie?
That's an interesting observation, because I think that was happening for me too, just his relationship to the play, which he's been, you know, very public about, and where he represents as a Black African-American actor in this industry. There was a lot of things working at the same time. Well, we can start with the word intimidating. Right there. You know, pressure-filled is some words also that come to mind when thinking about, reflecting about my experience, particularly on stage every night, saying these words that he's perfected, that he helped sort of erect and get to Broadway. You know, so there was a lot of pressure there, but I felt so encouraged because of how he supported us. He was a great resource. You know. All of his experience in the art, in this industry, he was very forthcoming about. He shared, and I didn't know at the time how that was going to help me with the character necessarily. But as I gradually got into it and grew into the character, I realized how beneficial it was for me to hear those stories and infuse that into the motivation of getting this thing as true as possible.
He was supportive of you guys, talking to you about like the industry and the craft, but like, did he talk to you about this character, or did he kind of leave that to you to interpret it?
Things that were working, he would comment on. Like, I never thought to do it that way, or I never thought about it this way. And he said that, and if you know Mr. Sam Jackson, he's a tough critic. So any kind of positive feedback from him is like, I'm taking my grave. If I never work again, I know Sam Jackson, like the choice I made, you know what I mean? So in that regard, yeah, he was influential in my encouragement of I'm on the right track.
I'm really curious, John David, why do you think actors in particular are drawn to Wilson's work, kind of as a way to deepen their craft? I'm thinking about all of the actors that are really well known today who have gone through and done these plays. Courtney B. Vance, James Earl Jones, Viola Davis, your father, Denzel, so many others. What is the gravitational pull?
I think so often we have to dig when we find really good writing, great writing. We still have to dig. These names you're talking about, we have to dig, we have to find it. You know, we excavate, we research, and we have to meet a lot of the writing, the really good writing, somewhere. August Wilson comes to us, and it's a relief when you get a voice that is yours, when you get a voice that is somebody you're related to, when you get an experience that both a 50-year-old, 70-year-old man, to 20 to 40-year-old man have. There's so many specific moments in our culture that he accurately depicts. I'm talking about when every N-word is properly placed. You know, there's magic to that, to be honest. So that gravitational pull you speak of, it's almost like a relief call. If we meet August Wilson with our best and most honest self and experience, you will come out a different actor.
If you're just joining us, my guests today are John David and Malcolm Washington. We're talking about their new film, The Piano Lesson. We'll continue our conversation after a short break. This is Fresh.
Many thanks to Cherry Creek North for its financial support. Learn more at cherrycreeknorth.com. You can learn more about the hundreds of organizations that sponsor Colorado Public Radio on the support page at cpr.org.
This is Fresh Air, and today I'm talking with Malcolm and John David Washington. The brothers have taken on the late playwright August Wilson's play, The Piano Lesson, for the screen on Netflix. The production of this film was a family affair. Their sister Katya and their father, Denzel Washington, are the film's producers. And Denzel is committed to adapting Wilson's plays, which capture the Black American experience through every decade of the 20th century into 10 films.
What do you mean by that?
Your names, Malcolm and John David.
Turn on the one back first. Turn on that one.
I can kind of guess with Malcolm, but I want to be sure.
Is it done enough?
Well, I guess I'll start because mine's a little controversial, if you will. I found out what I mean is, I'll explain. So John David, from what I thought, known until I was about 17, was my Uncle David, my great-grandfather John. One night after a victory, it was a high school football game, and we beat our rivals, and we're one game away from state championship. We're very excited. We're all happy. We're home celebrating and just screaming out loud on how great of a victory it was. And my father, in his joy, in great glee, he says, "That's why I named you John David, after John David Crow, a football player and record scratch." Because I guess that was the first time my mom heard that. Definitely first time I heard that. I didn't mind it. That's cool. But mom was like, "What?" And then she got quiet. And it's interesting how quietness can bring on like more anger than yelling, you know. And you could tell she was disturbed by that a little bit. She was like, "But Denzel, I thought it was named after David, your brother, and Grandpa John." And he kind of like, yeah. But the truth is, really, it was kind of a combination.
Yeah, so they had different stories on it.
They got different stories. Yeah.
Malcolm X, is that who you were named after or not?
Actually, no. Well, I'm named after. He's a cousin of mine, but our dynamic in age. He's like an uncle. My cousin Malcolm from Eden, North Carolina.
All Right. Big ups to cousin Malcolm.
Yeah.
I noticed.
And John David Crow, by the way.
And John, yeah, exactly. Don't leave John David Crow out.
Right, that's right. That's right. Both cousins, right. You know, I noticed how in interviews, both of you guys, you kind of say it offhandedly, but you regularly rep Los Angeles as your hometown. And I want to know, what does it mean for the both of you to identify not only as Angelinos, but, you know, you're Black Angelinos, and then you also come from like a very privileged section of that then as well. I mean, how did growing up here influence your art and your taste?
I love LA so much. I think LA's just an incredible city. There's so many amazing cultures that come together there, that it's like it's a place that's both a physical place and metaphysical, in that when people think about, like, there's an idea of what LA is, and then there's kind of a lived experience of what LA is. So I like that it operates on a couple different fronts. I think that it functions kind of like how Pittsburgh functions in our story, The Piano Lesson, where it's a place, especially for Black people, it's a place where in the Great Migration, so many Black people came in search of opportunity to build a new life, to build themselves up. So it's a place built off of not only the hopes, but the labor of dreams. You know, like somebody had to build that place, and I think that it lives in it lives in that.
You know, as a kid growing up in the 90s, your father Denzel, Spike Lee, Samuel L. Jackson, I'll even throw in like Eddie Murphy and just so many people. They played such a big role in the construction of Black pride for so many, myself included. And I really want to know how that felt internally to grow up among it and in it. Like, was Black history and Black pride also something that your parents instilled in you in the way that, like, just to the public, they were instilling in all of us?
Absolutely. You know, I grew up with such a strong consciousness, and you got to remember, like, I grew up in the era of my dad having played Malcolm X, you know, so I identify with Malcolm X as a figure. I identify with that part of our story. And growing up in LA in the 90s, post LA uprising, you know, where the Black people have a voice, they're fighting for something, they're believing in something, they're saying something. I connected to that so much. So that it's like how Boy Willie says, you know, I was born in a time of fire. It's like I feel that too, you know, that resonates with me, from both the creative artistic movements that were happening at the time, the political movements that were happening at the time, of people declaring themselves and who they are at the time, and so all of those things live in me, and I'm happy that my parents had such a pride in our culture, have such a respect for it, and instilled that in us.
Yeah. John David.
Yeah, I was just thinking about your question. In my childhood, you know, my first time I played Pop Warner football, tackle football, was Baldwin Hills. And you know,
Baldwin Hills is a neighborhood in Los Angeles, for those who don't know. Yeah,
that's right. But yet I was going to school in the Valley, you know, and you know, I remember the first time I got chased down by some Crips, you know, in Los Angeles with a friend of mine. You know, remember the first time being asked where you from, you know, and where your mom, all that. Like, there's a Kendrick part of it too. He's like, well, where your mom stay, where your grandma stay. I've experienced that before, you know, at Magic Johnson's movie theater. So,
what would you tell people? Because I mean, were you saying, "Oh, I'm Denzel Washington's son"?
I would absolutely not say that. You know, it was funny, like, and it was depicted in The Wood, like the character says, I'm from North Carolina. I would say that. I'm like, I would deny where I was from and say I was from another state a lot of times. But I forget why they were chasing us at one time. It was a friend of mine that started stuff.
You know why?
I do know why. Actually, I'm not gonna call them out here. But I think about some of those memories of my LA experience, because it is an interesting one because of the blends of cultures that I was able to experience. You know, going to private school, yet playing ball, Baldwin Hills, having friends that lived in different neighborhoods. You know, I just got a full course meal in diversity.
Yeah, and how to navigate. I mean, that is definitely an experience.
Well, what helped me with that navigation was sports, was athletics. No matter where you're from, like, they respect you if you put in work on the field or on the court. you actually become more interesting to that person that maybe not from the same background that you're from, but you're a killer on the court, on the field. That they know that you have their back and they can trust you. There's something about that. There's a universal language in sport and athletics that really helped me with my identity and helped me sort of course correct and navigate relationships I had from people that weren't from where I was from.
Sports is a unifying force, for sure. It also is like really high pressure, and I mean, all jobs are performances, but like sports and the creative space, particularly acting, like a bad sports play or a bad acting performance could make or break a career, right? I mean, both of you seem to thrive from that pressure. What is it in you, in the both of you, that maybe thrives from that pressure? John David.
Thrives from that. Well, I'm still kind of living. I don't know.
Yeah, you're one bad performance.
Yeah, like you say it like that. Like this could be. Well, I mean, a lot of it. This felt like life and death for me. I don't mean to get too dramatic, but this project, the play specifically, I knew on the other side of this, I'm going to find out about myself, and I did have these real conversations with myself and my publicist that if I fall, I don't know if I get back up from this.
Really?
You know, and
Why?
I did feel like, well, because of how powerful and how important and how we hold August Wilson's words and his artistry, and being on the boards, as they call it, on Broadway. You know, there's a lot more respect. There's a different kind of respect you get from your peers, from the community at large that are in the artistry if you can actually act. I've said this before. I liken it to a rapper. I've been able to work with the Dr. Dre's and the Pharrells and the Timberlands of the world as producers, but like, can you actually rap? Do you have bars? And that's what this was going. That's what I needed to find out for myself. And so I felt a lot of pressure in that way.
How do you make yourself comfortable with rejection?
Through repetition. I've had plenty of experiences with rejection. I'm very familiar with rejection. I've almost gotten comfortable to the point of where it becomes almost like an impervious feeling. And so my whole life, we're talking about our LA upbringing and stuff. Like it does feel that I felt like I might not have been able to be seen. I got rejected in my real personality sometimes, so I felt like I could hide it, or I could filter that through those feelings, through sport, through activity, to enact my my resentment that built up for how I was, in my interactions. So rejection is a byproduct of pursuing what you love and what you love doing.
I want to slow that down a little bit, that resentment that you're talking about. What do you mean when you say that?
So, if I got judged by somebody because they knew who I was related to, where I was from, I feel like I can introduce them or reintroduce them to me. I can reintroduce myself as this athlete on the field, or as this actor on the screen or stage. I don't necessarily use that as motivation anymore, but I did, and I found that I found success in it, and I found my identity in that. That I was finding respect from people
outside of your father's name. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Our guests today are director Malcolm Washington and actor John David Washington. We'll continue our conversation after a short break. I'm Tanya Mosley, and this is Fresh Air.
Supports WHYY's Fresh Air and its commitment to sharing ideas and encouraging meaningful conversation. Support for NPR comes from this station and from Americans United for Separation of Church and State. For more than 75 years, AU has supported freedom without favor and equality without exception. Learn more at au.org/NPR. And from the NPR Wine Club, bringing people wines inspired by NPR shows. Whether purchasing a few bottles or joining the club, every purchase supports NPR. Available to adults 21 or older. NPRWineClub.org.
From the plains to the Front Range and to the Western Slope, Colorado's artists are as vibrant as the landscape. I'm CPR Arts reporter Eden Lane, and I have the privilege to share their stories and keep you informed about current events. Hear about these inspiring, talented people on the Colorado Arts Spotlight every Thursday on Morning Edition and All Things Considered on CPR News and in the Colorado Public Radio app.
With support from the law firm of Allen, Vallone, Wolf, Helfrich, and Factor.
If you want to stand somewhere in Colorado and see from horizon to horizon, go to Lookout Mountain. That's the inspiration behind CPR's daily newsletter, The Lookout. The Lookout brings you stories Coloradans care about, and you might learn something you didn't know. Plus, fun and quirky stuff. From north to south, east to west. The Lookout. Weekday in your inbox, free. Sign up at
I got the last computer work with the other one. But if you plug anything else to it, turn
This
it on.
is Fresh Air. I'm Tanya Mosley, and today my guests are director Malcolm Washington and actor John David Washington. The brothers collaborated on the late August Wilson's The Piano Lesson for the screen on Netflix. It's the fourth play in Wilson's American Century Cycle, a series of 10 plays that capture the American experience for Black people through every decade of the 20th century. Malcolm Washington has produced and written several short films. The Piano Lesson is his directorial full-length feature debut. John David portrayed Boy Willie for the first time on Broadway and now plays him in the film. He also starred in several other films, including Spike Lee's Black Klansman, the mystery comedy thriller Amsterdam, and Christopher Nolan's time travel mind-bender Tenet. John David, you were a pro football player with the St. Louis Rams in the early 2000s. You also spent 4 years as a running back for the National Football League Sacramento. But when you were playing pro, you got injured.
The blanket was just too high on my side or something.
Tore my Achilles, and I ruptured it. Right,
or it could have been a head off the
that was it. Retirement.
That's right. I was turning down.
And that's when I transitioned into acting.
Yeah.
Open audition call for a football player for a show called Ballers. They were auditioning football players all over the country. And that was my way in.
I'd rather be
Is it true that you showed up with like your cast or boot or something to the audition, your Ballers audition?
Yeah, with the boot on pain pills, so it was very relaxed.
I didn't know they were going to work.
And I had my first audition. Sheila Jackson.
It's got those big old stretch pants on in front.
It's great. You were phenomenal in that, for that to be like your first major role.
Pants, which was probably still work too.
Your character in Ballers had this attachment to his college number 18, and he had all of these attachments. His first championship, his plays, his accomplishments that were like they were like steps. They were like a process to get, for his identity. And it's what you're talking about as far as you forging your identity. What was that process of letting that go and turning towards that new thing, that new identity, that identity that you kind of were running from your father's identity, but now you were stepping into it as a novice?
Kitty, okay, you need to move.
Yeah,
this fall, it's gonna fall right on you.
It was. These collaborations that I've been able to experience. Some of these sets, some of these films I got to be a part of, and these giants I've gotten to work with, who I revere so high. I think
what?
Hollywood guys, and them giving me the confidence in myself, them wanting to treat me like a colleague, trusting my instinct, picking me for a reason, and
nothing in it, kid. No treats for you.